Welcome to another journey through the long corridors of time. As you rest your head and let the hum of the modern world drift into silence, imagine yourself stepping softly into the past to the shadowed corners of Victorian England. The gaslight flickers low. The streets glisten with fog and soot. Behind iron gates and austere brick walls lies a place both feared and misunderstood. Tonight, we will not rush. We will not hurry. Instead, we will drift through lives lived in quiet desperation, through reforms shaped by determination, through sewage-laced waters that held the key to a city's salvation, and through grand dining rooms where crystal glasses chimed beneath chandeliers. 4 chapters, each revealing a different facet of the era. We begin in the workhouse, with its grey routine and hollow silence. Then, we meet a woman who dared to redefine care. After that, we'll explore the strange story of a river so foul it stopped a government in its tracks. And finally, we'll lift the velvet curtain on the contrasting world of the Victorian elite. Let your breath slow. Let the images take shape in your mind. And let us begin, where hope was often dim, but never fully Imagine. It is a drab morning in the year 1852. The fog hangs low, clinging to every worn brick and soot-blackened pane. A distant church bell marks the hour in solemn tones. And you, threadbare and hollow from nights spent in alleys or damp cellar rooms, approach the large iron gates of the workhouse. The building looms a fortress of charity, they call it, but it feels more like a prison of poverty. The stone is cold, the doors heavy. Above the archway, a faded inscription reads House of Industry. There is no welcome here, only judgment. Upon entering, the first thing you notice is the silence. Not peace but suppression. Voices are low, faces downturned. A clerk behind a desk, ink-stained and impassive, asks your name, your age, your trade, and then comes the part that strikes at the heart. You must surrender your few possessions, the threadbare shawl that belonged to your mother, the boots with holes, and the soles, but yours, taken. Worse still, if you came with family, you will not leave together. Husbands and wives, parents and children, all are separated into different wards. Your world is fragmented before you've even stepped beyond the entryway. It is said to prevent idleness and dependence, but in practice, it ensures despair. You are given a uniform, shapeless, coarse, and stiff with starch. Your hair may be cropped. Your name becomes a number in the ledger. The workhouse day begins before dawn. Bells ring at 6. You wake on a thin mattress in a long dormitory hall. The air stale with too many breaths and little ventilation. The clatter of boots on flagstones signals a new day of order and obedience. Breakfast is served, if it can be called that. A ladle of gruel, warm, grey, and flavorless. Sometimes a scrap of bread. The taste is less memorable than the act of eating, always under watchful eyes. Women and children may be sent to pick oak on picking apart old ropes to reuse the fibers. The task is mind-numbing, rough on the fingers, and seemingly endless. Ropes caked in tar are broken strand by strand, the fibers catching under fingernails, the tar staining skin. Men may be assigned to crush bones or break stones, heavy work with little purpose other than punishment in disguise. Or they might be sent to the laundry, the stables, the gardenage task, a reminder that their time belongs to the institution. Each motion is monitored. Discipline is strict. A misstitch, a slow step, a glance in the wrong direction might earn a reprimand or worse, a meal withheld. You feel it, don't you? That ever-present tension. Not fear of physical violence per se, but fear of nothingness, of being reduced to function alone. The rhythm of their lives, of your life, if only for tinnitus. A quiet erosion of the self. Mealtimes are equally sparse. Gruel again for supper, perhaps with a spoonful of peas or a potato on Sundays. The smell of overboiled cabbage clings to the air. Nutrients are few, and hunger becomes a familiar companion. The dormitories are crowded. Rows of iron beds, low murmurs at night, occasional coughing wet, persistent, ominous. Disease spreads quickly here. The wards for the ill are overcrowded and understaffed. Sanitation is poor. Soap is precious. And yet, within the silence, there are echoes of humanity. A whispered story shared under blanket. A quiet hymn hummed before sleep. The rhythm of their lives is often one of suffering, but not entirely devoid of light. Perhaps the cruelest part of the workhouse was not within its walls, but beyond them. To be seen entering a workhouse was to be marked for life. Employers would hesitate to hire a known pauper. Children born in the workhouse carried its shadow into adulthood. Respectability was everything in Victorian England, and the workhouse stripped it away. The Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834 had made this model central to aid in England and Wales. Its architects believed that by making the conditions inside worse than any outside, only the truly desperate would apply. It worked, but at what cost? As you drift in this imagined space, you may wonder, how many lives faded into silence behind those walls? How many hopes dissolved into that daily grind? And yet, within these grim places were also beginnings. For some, it was the first time they had food each day, a bed, however cold, each night, a place where their children were schooled. The workhouse was hush, but for some, it was also the last refuge before the street. In this quiet night, as we leave the long shadow of the workhouse behind, let us turn to someone who sought to change this tide, a woman of precision and compassion, the lady with the lamp. As we drift from the dim corridors of the workhouse, our path now takes us elsewhere, to a quieter place. A candle flickers gently on a polished desk. The air smells faintly of paper, ink, and lavender soap. You hear the scratch of a quill on parchment, and the distant clatter of carriage wheels beyond tall windows. Here sits Florence Nightingale. Not yet an icon, not yet the lady with the lamp. Just a woman of sharp mind, fierce discipline, and a sense of destiny too large to ignore. Imagine Florence as a young woman in the 18th, raised amid the rolling hills and refined parlors of upper-class England. Her family expects her to marry, to host dinner parties, to produce a lineage. But she feels a pull subtle, persistent, like a stream under stone towards something else. In journals and quiet letters, she writes of a calling, not a whim or curiosity, but a deep, spiritual compulsion to serve, to heal. Her family resists. Nursing, in that era, was not seen as noble. It was associated with drunkards, scullery maids, and the hospitals were places of last resort, dirty and often deadly. But Florence is patient, quietly determined. She studies statistics. She reads philosophy and mathematics late into the night. She learns languages. She travels to Germany to train in nursing under Protestant sisters. She observes. She records. And when the time comes, she acts. The year is 1854. France and the Ottoman Empire locked in conflict against Russia. Reports from the front are grim. British soldiers die not just from battle, but from infection, filth, neglect. Hospitals are overwhelmed. Sanitation is almost non-existent. Florence is appointed superintendent of nurses and sent to Scutari, a military hospital in Constantinople. What she finds there chills her. Imagine long corridors, dark and stinking with the weight of too many wounded men, blood-caked floors, soiled bedding, rats, the dead and the dying sharing space. She does not flinch. Her first act is not to tend the wounded directly, but to clean. She organizes supplies. She orders thousands of towels, shirts, bed. She demands soap, disinfectants, and proper drainage. The work is methodical, tireless. The rhythm of her days like a metronome alternates between administration and compassion. At night, she walks the wards alone with a lantern, checking on patients, whispering reassurance. The soldiers begin to call her the lady with the lamp. But Florence is not romantic about her role. She is exacting, stern. Even she studies the numbers. She compiles data charts showing that more soldiers die of disease than wounds. Her findings are revolutionary. She brings not just comfort, but reform. After the war, Florence returns to England a national heroine, but she remains out of sight. Ill from her time in Scutari, she lives in seclusion, but her mind continues its tireless work. Here's where Florence Nightingale becomes something more than a nurse. She becomes a reformer, a strategist. She creates the first modern nursing school at St. Thomas Hospital. She trains nurses to treat patients with professionalism and empathy. She influences hospital design, insisting on fresh air, natural lights, proper sanitation, and always, she uses data. She presents her research to Parliament not in tables, but in visual charts, ingenious coxcomb diagrams that illustrate death causes with startling clarity. These visuals speak where words fall short. Her work shapes the future of healthcare. The reforms she advocates ripple through workhouse infirmaries, public hospitals, military medicine. Slowly, institutions that once degraded the poor begin to shift. Florence lived a long life, but much of it in quiet, away from public view. And perhaps that is fitting. She was not a woman of spectacle. She did not seek applause. Her legacy is not just the lamp, but the discipline behind it. The charts, the training, the advocacy behind closed doors. She understood something that many did not, that the smallest changes, soap and clean linens, fresh air and statistics, could save more lives than the grandest of speeches. And though she never walked the halls of every workhouse, her reforms touched them all. Nurses trained in her school tended the sick poor. Standards she set became law, and through her insistence on care rooted in data and compassion, she softened the edges of a system built on hardness. As we move gently forward, let us turn from the quiet wards to the noisy, reeking streets of London, to a summer so foul it brought the city to its knees, a mystery of stench, of science, and of a river in revolt. Let us now meander through the streets of Victorian London once more, though this time, not into institutions or homes, but into the very air itself. It is a summer afternoon in the year 1858. The Thames glimmers under a sweltering sun. The city teems with life vendors calling out, carriage wheels rattling over cobblestones, children playing in alleys. But all of it, every sound, every motion is muffled beneath something else. A thick, suffocating, sickly stench that coils through every lane and lingers in every breath. A smell so dreadful, so persistent, that people walk the streets with handkerchiefs soaked in vinegar pressed to their noses, that members of Parliament flee their chambers, that fine linen curtains are soaked in chloride of lime. Desperate attempts to ward off the invisible threat. This is the great stink. To understand this moment, we must look not just at the surface of the Thames, but below. London in the mid-19th century was a city bursting at the seams over 2 million people, growing every day, most of them packed into dense neighborhoods with little sanitation. There were no proper sewers as we know them today. Instead, most homes emptied their waste into cesspools, shallow pits, dug in basements and yards. When those overflowed, which they often did, the contents were funneled into open drains, which ran, in turn, into the city's lifeline, the River Thames. But the Thames was not just a sewer, it was also a source of drinking water. Imagine that. The same murky water that received the filth of tens of thousands was drawn up again for tea and supper. It is no surprise that outbreaks of cholera ravaged the city, 4 major epidemics between 1832 and 1866, each one more devastating than the last. And yet, few understood why. The prevailing theory of the time was miasma, the belief that disease was spread by bad air, by foul smells rising from decay. Doctors and lawmakers alike were convinced that if a place reeked, it must be dangerous, and if the air was clean, then health would follow. And so, efforts focused not on germs whose existence was still largely unknown, but on odor, on masking stench, on deodorizing rather than disinfecting. But among the din of competing theories, one voice stood out: Dr. John Snow, a physician who believed something radical, that cholera was spread not by air, but by water. During the 1854 outbreak in Soho, Snow famously mapped the locations of cholera deaths and traced the epidemic to a single water pump on Broad Street. When the handle was removed, cases dropped. His theory, grounded in data, was persuasive, but still, most clung to until the river itself made its case. In that summer of 1858, a brutal heatwave descended upon London. The already polluted Thames grew stagnant, the sun coaxing up its worst secrets: decaying organic matranimal waste, human sewage, chemical The smell became unbearable. Parliamentary, housed on the very banks of the river, attempted desperate measures: curtains soaked in lime, carpets treated with chloride. But nothing worked. Session after session was disrupted. Lawmakers began to fall ill. Newspapers described it as a civic emergency. One called it a pestiferous and typhus-breeding abomination. The city could no longer look away. And finally, after years of petitions, editorials, and scientific papers, the government agreed. Enter Joseph Bazalgette, appointed chief engineer of the Metropolitan Board of Works. Bazalgette had already proposed a plan, a vast, modern sewer system that would carry waste far downstream, away from drinking water, away from neighborhoods. His design was ambitious. Over 1,100 miles of street sewers feeding into 82 miles of main intercepting sewers, supported by massive pumping stations and treatment plants. All of it built beneath the city's roads, and construction began almost immediately after the Great Stink and proceeded with astonishing speed. Thousands of workers labored day and night. Massive pipes were laid, brick by brick, beneath streets that still bustled above. By the 1870s, most of London was connected to the new system, and it worked. The air cleared. The Thames, slowly, began to recover, and cholera vanished. Not overnight, but with steady certainty. Today, much of Bazalgette's system still functions, silent and unseen. It winds beneath London like a second city, a tribute not just to engineering, but to persistence, to logic over fear, to the slow, steady progress of understanding. The Great Stink was a crisis, but it forced a reckoning. It proved that change often comes not from inspiration, but from discomfort, from the need to make a place livable again. And though the poor still struggled, though the workhouses still stood, though disease still threatened, this was a turning point. A moment when the city, for all its flaws, chose to fix what lay beneath. As the evening air cools, and the scent of the river fades from your mind, let us now leave the damp brick tunnels, and resent to warmth, into velvet-draped parlors and glittering ballrooms, into a very different world. We've lingered in the corridors of suffering. We've walked the wards and breathed the city's stench. But now, let us drift upward into high society, into lamplight gleaming off cut crystal, and polished boots stepping onto marble floors, into a world that flourished even as others starved. This is the realm of the Victorian industrial magnata, new kind of elite, born not of noble blood, but of iron, coal, cotton, and steam. Imagine yourself in Manchester or Birmingham or the wealthier quarters of London in the final decades of the 19th century. You enter a tall townhouse of red brick and terracotta. The doorman nods silently as you pass beneath an archway etched with floral relief. Inside, gaslights hiss softly on the walls, casting a warm glow on silk wallpaper and framed oil portraits. This is the home of a self-made man, perhaps a mill owner, a railway tycoon, or the proprietor of a shipping empire. His father may have been a tradesman, his grandfather a farm laborer, but now he is wealthier than most dukes. The parlors are decorated in the style of the aesthetic movement, plush divan, Japanese folding screens, peacock feathers, gilt mirrors. His wife, perhaps, in a gown of deep burgundy silk, oversees the placement of flowers and the timing of dinner. The rhythm of their lives could not be more different from that of the pulp. They rise late. They dine in several courses: soup, fish, roast, game, pudding, each dish carried in by liveried servants. There is champagne, there is sherry, there is music, a string quartet playing discreetly in the corner. Conversation flows easily of investments, of exhibitions, of arts, and industry. Outside, the city may smell faintly of smoke and horses, but inside these walls, it is all perfume and progress. Many industrialists did not stop at city men. They bought land-vast estates in the countryside where they could host fox hunts and garden parties, establishing themselves alongside the old landed gentry. Imagine a weekend retreat in the Cotswolds or Yorkshire, a stone manor, ivy creeping across the stables full of thoroughbreds, a conservatory bursting with hothouse orchids. Here, they played the part of country gentlemen, hiring gamekeepers, donating to churches, sponsoring local schools. But unlike the ancient aristocracy, these men had built their fortunes from the ground up. They were not born into legacies. They forged it. And with that came attention. For all their comfort, many magnates were uncomfortably aware of the conditions that made their wealth possible. The mills ran on the labor of women and children. The coal mines swallowed men by the thousands. The factories paid by the piece, pushing speed over safety. The very workhouses we explored earlier were often funded by the same elite who owned the means of production. And yet many saw themselves as benevolent. Some donated libraries to their towns. Others built model villages for their workers, rows of clean cottages, schools, parks. The famous Cadbury brothers created the village of offering a peaceful, dry, and morally upright life for chocolate factory workers. They supported temperance movements, backed hospitals, and sometimes sat on poor law boards, but their philanthropy was often paternalistic, offering uplift, but only on their terms. They sought not just to help, but to mold. A good worker, they believed, should be sober, God-fearing, industrious, and grateful. Education was encouraged, but not too much. Recreation was promoted, but not of the rowdy kind. Theirs was a vision of order, and so, even in their giving, they reinforced the hierarchy. The distance, the rhythm of their lives was one of abundance, but also control. The phrase two nations was coined by Benjamin Disraeli in his novel. Sybil II described the yawning gap between the rich and the poor in Victorian Britain. One nation, he wrote, of the rich and the poor, the one living in luxury, the other in the one having all, the other wanting all. And yet, the two were linked by chimney smoke and child labor, by taxes and laws, by the invisible thread of economic dependence. The industrial magnate lived in luxury, but that luxury was built upon the spinning of looms and the lifting of coal. The great dinner parties sparkled, even as children coughed into rags by the workhouse hut. But some tried to bridge the gap. Some truly sought reform, and others simply enjoyed the fruits of empire, untroubled by its roots. As the string quartet plays its final notes, and the footman dims the lamps one by one, the grand house falls into stillness, the silver polish for tomorrow. Outside, the lamplighters make their way down the street. The air is cooler now. Somewhere far off, a factory whistle blows, marking the night shift. And in this silence, we return from the drawing rooms and banquet halls to ourselves, to the quiet thought that history is made not only by kings and queens, but by countless lives stacked in contrast, wound together. And now, the lantern dims. We have wandered together through the quiet desperation of the workhouse, past its threadbare beds and the endless picking of rope. We have walked in the measured steps of Florence Nightingale, who traded comfort for conviction and changed the world, not with noise, but with numbers. We have held our breath above the foul waters of the Thames, and witnessed the great stink give way to great innovation. And we have stood silently in the warmth of parlors and under shadow, watching a new class rise upon the back of the industrial age. Each place, each person, an echo of what once was. And yet, as you rest now, you may feel how near it all still is. The rhythm of their lives, though shaped by coal and candlelight, speaks softly into ours. The fear of falling behind, the yearning for dignity, the comfort of routine, the quiet power of reform, the need to be seen and heard and remembered. What you have heard tonight is not merely history. It is humanity, stretched across time. If your eyes are heavy now, let them close. If your thoughts are distant, let them drift. For the workhouses are long since closed, and the soot has cleared from the skies. The city breathes cleaner air. Medicine has advanced. Rights have expanded, and the beds we lie in now are warm not only with blankets, but with freedom. So rest easy. The unsleeping historian will keep watch until morning comes.